starting at the beginning. First impressions of the Messenger. The moment you loaded it up, saw what the game had to offer, 10, 15 minutes into the game. Starting in that village, you drop down out of the tree and it's got that look of, what's his name from Ninja Gaiden? Joe Musashi or something like that, isn't it? His name is Joe. I forgot his name. Exactly the same kind of facial box when they're talking, and he comes up and says his bit, and then he goes over, and all hell breaks loose. Nick, what were your first impressions?
I hadn't played Ninja Gaiden before this, so for me, I didn't have the connection with. I know you've played it before, so you obviously could see that. For me, it was just like, okay, this is a bit like Shovel Knight in terms of how it looks and what it's going for. Like, that's not a bad thing. It was just a very much so they're really solidly going for the sort of 8-bit style. I think they pulled it off quite well, because it definitely looks like an 8-bit game, but obviously it wouldn't run on the NES, would it? So kind of like Shovel Knight.
Even NES games don't run on the NES.
True story. But yeah, I mean, my first impressions were like not really positive or negative, kind of neutral. I just sat and watched it and enjoyed it and wanted to play. But yeah, there's quite a long intro, isn't there? There's quite a little bit of backstory to it at the beginning.
Yeah, yes, there is. Yeah, I quite like the story intro, and I felt pretty neutral as well. When you running through the village first of all, and then you learn how to cloud step jump, they call it, by hitting something like a lantern, and then you can double jump basically after hitting something. And yeah, it felt solid. It felt lag free, it felt, everything felt spot on.
It eases you into it quite nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah,
but you don't have very many abilities, well, almost no abilities at the beginning. It's just like that first zone before Autumn Hills is just basically like, go to the right of the screen and complete these tiny little challenges. And I like the premise at the beginning of the game. It is literally just go to the other side of the island. That's it. That's all you need to do. Go to the other side of the island.
How about you, Greg? Your first impressions?
I wish I could remember. I have to get this out of the way. It's like I had played 5 hours of The Messenger last year. It must have been when I downloaded it on sale. So when we decided we were going to play this for the PodPals episode, I resumed my save file. And part of me was tempted to go back to play through the first few hours, but at the time I felt like 5 hours was probably quite a significant chunk of the way through the game. So I just decided to resume my file. So I don't really remember. I do know that like I have been like tired of seeing lots of 8-bit games and stuff, and 16 bits and whatever. But like the Messenger had sort of like a good style about it, and as soon as I started, I do remember like it felt good, and like the visuals and like the music and all just sort of like it did feel good, and it felt better than like any NES game I've ever played, obviously. So yeah, like the first impressions were certainly good. I just wish I could remember a bit more.
I also, by the way, I did the same as Greg. I played about 2 or 3 hours of it last year, possibly earlier this year. But I went back to the beginning. I started from the beginning again, from the very beginning. So yeah, I'd already done the first couple of worlds, but I couldn't remember anything. So I thought I might as well just start it again. And yeah, like exactly what Greg said. It looks like a NES game, but it feels good, and the graphics are like nice for that 8-bit style.
I mean, ultimately, like you do go back and explore those original areas again anyway, so I didn't feel like I was really missing out on that much by not starting again. But as I'm sure we'll get into, there'll be things that you guys will bring up that that will maybe either refresh my mind or be like, I can't remember that at all.
And I think I've got to get my plug out of the way. I have a Let's Play which is going on, so if you do want to refresh your memory of especially the first part of it, Greg, get over to my YouTube channel, Old Nintendo Gamer and Son, and you can watch that opening section where I even voice the bad guy. Well, I voice everybody in it. I had fun. Obviously had fun playing the game, but I also had a lot of fun doing the voices. That was good. But Nick Draken also had some first impressions. What were his? This is Draken from
from the forum.
Forums.
He said, played it for about an hour. I love it. Spot on platforming, action, tight controls, sweet retro graphics, and the music. Oh, the music.
He's got a point. The music.
He's got a point.
Was really toe-tapping throughout, pretty much throughout. It was wonderful music. Okay. And then we have basically had two people from the forums share their thoughts throughout the entirety of their playthrough for the game, which will drop in their bits and pieces. And Greg, the second person, was HOT.
Yeah, the mysteriously absent HOT. So yeah, he'd said I ended up picking this up yesterday evening. I'm not sure how long ago that was.
It was back in February, I think.
But given how quickly he could blast through the games, I could believe that he picked it up yesterday evening and had finished it. So yeah, he said I've been after it for a while, and it was on sale for $7.99 on PlayStation Network. It's also on sale on the eShop, but it's £1 extra. Yeah.
How much did you pick it up for, by the way, on the eShop? I can't remember.
I paid $8.99 for it. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that probably was the price I paid for it as well.
Yeah. I must have been similar to me. So like HOT didn't seem to like he was that keen on using the D-pad for the Switch and no trophy support. So he obviously went to the PlayStation version. So it was a no-brainer, and I played some of it, and he had it on pretty much all day. That was basically his impressions.
Finished it in a day. So we'll move on to some how we feel about the graphics, especially differentiating between the 8-bit and the 16-bit. We'll deep dive a bit later as well, between different segments of the game and all that. For me, the game runs really, really smoothly. I don't think I had an issue with any kind of jitteriness or any kind of input lag or anything like that. And graphically, between 8-bit and 16-bit, there's obviously we're going to be talking elements of this game. We're going to be deep dive talking, so we're going to be spoiling it. So if you don't want to know anything about the Messenger, why are you listening to us? There's a change in the middle of the game, not halfway through, but about a third of the way through, where it goes to 16-bit, which then turns it into an open world game. So I was loving the 8-bit style, but not 100%, but I was enjoying it. I liked the kind of clean background to it. And then when I went into the 16-bit, this is a slight negative thing, I found the backgrounds were too cluttered, especially where you end up in the 16-bit in the first one, which were the cloud ruins. And I found it very difficult to know, is that here, is that there, is that blocking my path? Is that a wall? Can I walk through here? Is that a lantern? Because everything looked so different. Yes, you get used to it after a while, but that change, first of all, was quite jarring. What were your takeaways from the graphics and the smoothness of the game, Nick?
Very smooth. Very, very smooth. I'm kind of tired of 8-bit graphics now. And while they look nice in this game, for me, it was nothing special, to be honest. Especially compared with like Shovel Knight. I think they both look good and they both go for that sort of 8-bit style and they pull it off really well. But for me now, it's not anything special. However, the 16-bit graphics, I think, are probably the best I've ever seen in an indie game. I think they capture the look of a 16-bit game almost perfectly. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just the colours or, how everything's mixed together. But when you play the 16-bit sections, it honestly feels and looks like you're playing a SNES game. And obviously, this game probably couldn't run on the SNES. But it just, for me, it really perfectly captured that feeling of playing a Super Nintendo game. In terms of the music and the visuals, I think they've done a superb job. And I had no issue with the backgrounds, to be honest. Definitely preferred moving in 16-bit to 8-bit. Like, just such a nice game to look at, I think. I think they've done amazing with it.
How about you, Greg? Any difference?
I don't really recall having that issue with the graphics either when it went to 16 bits. Like, I don't remember having a problem seeing things or whatever, but that's not to say I didn't have it and have forgotten. But like Nick, 8-bit. Like I've never been a fan of the NES really. So like the 8-bit graphics, I was sort of like playing through the first portion of the game, like, and it looked fine, sounded fine. It was like all good, but like I was looking forward to getting to that first taste of 16-bit.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, that's when I actually stopped playing. As soon as I hit 16-bit, it's like, I've finally seen it. It was like, and for some reason, I just found myself drifting away from the game for a while. But that may be more down to the change in the way the game is structured after you get to the 16-bit section, but we'll probably talk about that later. But like visually, like really enjoyed it, and how you can flick between the two. Like I always enjoyed the 16-bit more, but I like that you could just change them. Like obviously there's not a button to change it, you have to go through specific like warp points or whatever, but like I did enjoy that aspect of the game.
So taking that, the 8 and 16-bit as well, the sound design, the music, the way they use that simple tune from the 8-bit, and then when you went into 16-bit, the same song, but then amplified with that kind of extra power that the 16-bit gave it. The elements when you went underwater, which kind of muted the tune as if you were underwater. Brilliant touch that was. And that could happen anywhere in the game. And we've talked about it already. I thought the tunes were fantastic throughout, for the vast majority of them. As Draken has said, banger music.
Banger music.
Yeah, and the wee transitions like were just like seamless between, obviously, when you do change and go underwater stuff. It's a nice way, like, I loved that back in Banjo-Kazooie back in the time, when you jumped into the water and stuff and it just changed. Yeah, it was good. Yeah,
the soundtrack is unbelievable. It is so good, this soundtrack. And I enjoyed it so much that I ended up doing a little bit of research about it and finding out like who the composer and stuff was. There's actually a podcast, I can't remember, it's like 2 months ago now when I listened to it, or a month ago, sorry, when I listened to it. But there's a 2-hour interview with the sound designer of this game. Absolutely painstaking process. It took him a very long time, and he had like 100 rejected songs from this game that he didn't like, and he spent so much time perfecting it. The 8-bit stuff was made on a real sort of NES soundboard, so everything that could be on the NES is used, and the 16-bit was done on a Genesis emulator. So because I thought, especially in I can't remember the name of the world now, but there's the Riviera or something like that. What's it called?
Riviera Turquoise.
That, like, if you just listen to the music, you can hear like the Genesis sounds in it. It is all of the Mega Drive. Sorry, I should say not the Genesis. The Mega Drive sounds in it. It sounds a little bit like Sonic, a little bit like Rise Star at times. It's just really, really clear.
Sounds like something that the SNES couldn't have pulled off. Yeah.
Blast processing.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like, yeah, I'm not too keen on the 8-bit versions. I'm tired, as I said, I'm tired of 8-bit games. But I've had the whole 16-bit soundtrack on my phone for the last few weeks, and yeah, it's amazingly good, I would say. The little touches as well, like when you go underwater, like the way I've got my speakers set up in my room, when you go underwater, it sounds like the music's coming from behind me, even though I don't have any rear speakers. It's I don't know what they've done, but it is a smooth transition, and yeah, it sounds great. And the transitions obviously as well between 8 and 16-bit, just Excellent sound design. Excellent sound design.
I was playing it with headphones because I was recording it as I was playing it, and yes, I got that feeling as well. You jump in the water, and that echo they've got, it does really make you feel like the music is coming from behind you. Yeah. Anything to add, Greg?
Well, I played the game mostly handheld, actually.
Okay.
So I didn't always have the volume up that loud because there were times I sat in the living room with like my family and stuff, and they were watching something on TV. But the times when I could appreciate the music, like, it was fantastic. And I definitely went into work a few times and I had like Autumn Hills in my head and stuff. Like, it was good.
Yeah, so the game mechanics we're going to break down now. The movement of the messenger, his jumping abilities, his gliding abilities, which all these abilities were upgradable as you go through it, just in a kind of, you know, as the 16-bit opens up as well. But even before that, in the 8-bit, you end up getting a wall jump, which basically sticks you to a wall. Allows you to climb up walls and slide down walls. And there's a gliding mechanic, which you press the B button whilst you've jumped already. So it acts as a double jump. It allows you to basically wingsuit movement. And if there's an updraft of air, you can use that to gain elevation. And other bits and pieces like the claws, we talked about the claws, this climbing walls, and the dart rope, which you press A on lanterns and even on enemies. You would shoot a dart rope out and it would pull you across to it, slice them with your sword, and continue that momentum to get across gaps, which could be linked together to get across huge gaps. Did you, Greg, enjoy how the messenger moved?
For the most part, yes. It did feel really good. I don't really remember getting like the incremental upgrades all the time, because when I started, resumed about five hours in or whatever, I think I had everything by that stage.
You do get most things quite early on in the game, don't you?
Yeah. And like the wall jumping thing, it reminded me a lot of Mega Man X on the Super Nintendo, because I think you can just like jump up the same wall. You don't have to jump back and forward between walls. You can climb up the same one. But generally it all felt really good, and like you say, like the dart rope and stuff, it felt good to sort of keep that momentum going and stuff. And obviously you needed it to reach certain areas and stuff, and like there's plenty of wee secret areas and stuff that you can reach by using that sort of thing, or using all your different moves and stuff. And you have to be like really pretty proficient with most of the moves to be able to reach some of those areas. But there are times later in the game where I found that what I wanted to do, it just felt like the controls didn't really completely work the entire time. And like, when you press the button, like the things happen, it's fine, but there are sections where you have to like bounce off lanterns and stuff, and then like maybe dart rope to something else, and then quickly do something else. And when you're trying to put it all together, it's like it wasn't really holding up. But I'm not sure how much of that was down to me really, or down to the game, because even by the end of it, like there's a section which I'm sure we'll get to later towards the end of the game, where it's like you really, really need to be like good at everything. And even by that stage, I still wasn't entirely 100% comfortable with certain things, so I kind of felt like I muddled my way through it eventually. But it is what it is. It's like, it's hard to complain too much. It did feel good for the most part.
Nick, what are your thoughts on the mechanics?
To be honest, I'm pretty much with Greg on everything. I think if you took away the gliding mechanic and the sort of bouncing off lanterns and the jump cloud, everything else is perfect. It's just literally those couple of things that I could never quite get right. Even after 10, 15 hours, I was still messing up with that. And it becomes really frustrating at times. But if you're like, obviously Autumn Hills has a warp point, so I've gone through Autumn Hills a lot just by collecting the tokens and stuff. But getting through Autumn Hills is just an absolute pleasure, because, you know, I've learned the level now. Obviously, I know where the enemies are, I know where the lanterns are, and I can just absolutely fly through that. And it feels so good when you do everything, you know, little cloud jump here, then the dart rope, and kill this enemy with the shuriken. Perfect. But under pressure, and maybe it is me, maybe it's not the game, but I made so many mistakes with this cloud jump and the lantern bouncing under pressure. And maybe I'm just not very good at like side-scrolling games anymore, especially compared to when I was younger. But yeah, not perfect, unfortunately. For the most part, it's very, very solid, but it's not perfect. And it also really wound me up when he used to stick to the wall when you didn't want him to. That's one of my
But both of the things you mentioned there, unforgivable.
Mm-hmm.
It's far too it kind of sucks you to the wall, doesn't it? You're not even near the wall sometimes, and you stick to it.
Mm-hmm. If there'd been a button to grab the wall, it would have been better, I think. But this was intentional because they acknowledge it. The shopkeeper makes a joke about sticking to the wall and how it frustrates people, so they obviously knew about it. So nice little self-referential thing there from the shopkeeper.
There were times when I was falling, trying to dodge some spikes, for example, moving spikes, and you can even attach yourself to the spike wall, take damage, stick to that spike wall, and take damage a second time. And before you find out, oh my god, I got to jump off! I've stuck to this wall that's full of spikes. There were times where, like you say, it was very infuriating. I found that like you both mentioned as well, that cloud step jump. There's one section where you've got these they're like I can't even say, they're like little angels, right? They're glowing.
Yeah.
There's a section, really long section, with a bottomless pit basically, and you've got to hit off a few of these, hit a few lanterns, and then you've got to climb. You've got to drop under and then climb back up to get to the exit. The amount of times I had to do that section.
It took me ages to do that.
At the other end of it, that Fobokin is there. And I dropped off. I got the Fobokin, I dropped off, and I had to do it again. And I'm there on one of the lanterns, trying to bounce up higher. I'm just there for 5 minutes, just bouncing, I'm not getting up higher. And then, now and again, you would bounce up higher. It just felt so random that sometimes you couldn't get extra elevation and sometimes you could. And if you needed extra elevation off an enemy at a particular point and couldn't get that extra elevation, you've had it. You're in that pit. That really exploded my...
That's exactly the section that I had the most problem with.
Me too.
And like you, I got through that section a couple of times. I was like, that was a relief. But then there was so much further to go after that to get to that. It's like... Yeah, that was probably the most frustrating bit of the game, and I think I actually sent you a video of that section at one point because it was just maddening, and like the enemies that you were saying, that the wee angels or whatever they were calling, like the wee purple things that were sort of like they went up kind of when you went up or whatever, and it's like if you didn't quite, obviously like you said, you had to go down through that room first of all, because there's a big wall in the middle which you have to go underneath and then go up. Like if they weren't in just the exact position you needed when you were going through the room, like the first time, whatever, I didn't feel like I could ever get to a point where they would be in the position where I needed to get up to the bit. So it was like, right, I'd be hanging on for ages, just trying, and it's just like, I just have to give up and try again.
Frustrating. But overall, I think the general takeaway of it, for most of the part, the platforming is pretty much spot on.
Yeah.
You know, if you jump, you know how far you're going to jump. There's a couple of occasions I over jumped and thought, was that me? Why did I jump like a third extra distance? But I must have done something, and it was a bit weird now and again. But for the most part of it, yes, very, very solid.
Yep, there is. Sorry, just one final bit on that. There's I think there's a bit sort of getting towards the end of the game where there's maybe a section where it kind of teaches you to, like, I think it's to use like the dart rope, and you're going really fast at that point, and you shoot up off a real far distance, like, and you sort of link a few of those together maybe, and then I think maybe at the end of the game, or maybe it's in the DLC, I feel like there's sections in that where it like expects you to do that, but I never felt like I was comfortable with that, with the way that works.
I think the chase section, which we'll probably talk about later, in the corrupted future, you need to kind of link a few of those dart rope expansion, and you pull yourself along faster, and you need to link a few of those together.
Yeah.
With a few other jumps and cloud step jumps, link them all together, and if you mess up once, it's the end of you. How do you feel about Death, Quabble, his payment scheme? Nick?
It's fine. I died a lot. I think after finishing the main game and the DLC, I think it was 450 deaths for the whole thing. But that's 100% completion, so I got all the time shards. And the seals, sorry. But I think it was 300 by the time I beat the final boss. So that's, I mean, it's not like Celeste, but it's a lot. Very generous checkpointing, which is greatly appreciated. Like, whenever I died, I didn't have to do too much again, which, you know, you basically get put right back at the start of the bit where you died. So that's one thing that is not carried over from the 16-bit era, and I'm very, very grateful for that, because I think if, you know, dying 300 times, if you have to do long sections, I would have given up. Like, I would have just...
There were a few long sections.
Yeah. There were a few, yeah, but it wasn't that common, and it wasn't that frustrating to keep dying. I mean, it was frustrating in the fact that it was difficult, but not in the fact that you had to basically do loads before you could get back to where you were. But yeah, like the payment system, I guess I'd probably have given him a hell of a lot of money.
Now and again, he pops up and says, "Hey,
yeah,
you've given me 1,400 or
something
whatever."
crazy like that. But no, it's fine. It doesn't, like, I don't. That didn't bother me whatsoever. Like, I was able to buy everything I needed easily throughout the playthrough, so it didn't really affect me too much, I would say.
So what I haven't explained, as you're going through the game, you collect these time shards, which are like yellow diamonds, and then you use these time shards then to buy extra upgrades in the shopkeeper's shop, which and your upgrades are things which don't impact games so much, but they allow you to have like a cooldown attack. So your attack is 3 times the strength, so you can kill some of those green shelled enemies in 1 hit instead of 3.
Mm-hmm.
And they got extra little things that allow you to boost swim, so you can swim through certain sections faster. And it's with those time shards that you open up these extra abilities. And when you die, Quabble will consume a few of those, about 20 or 30, I should imagine, before he goes off on his way again. What were your feelings about that, Greg?
I think I was probably a wee bit more unsure of it at the beginning, because you are dying so much every time you restart, and he is just taking all these things that you need to obviously use to pay for your upgrades and stuff. It's like, I'm not really getting anywhere with the upgrade system, because I'm not able to obtain enough of these time shards really. But the more you play, it's like you sort of soon realise that you do get more than enough of them, and like I had my skill tree like maxed out like a decent way before the end of the game and stuff, so like you definitely get enough stuff, and you can use that payment as well for other things, which I actually really appreciate about the game as well. Like, obviously because it is like a Metroidvania, like the second half of it, like 16-bit section, you maybe like those power sales, is that what they're called? Power sales, the wee green coin type things. Those would be, for me, I would never ever have bothered going for all of them, but you can actually pay to have like the locations of them revealed.
Yeah.
And that really, really helped. And you can also use that payment to find out the locations of other things as well. So I did actually really appreciate that, like throughout the game. Like you may be having trouble with things, but if you like pay some of your time shards, like you're not going to be completely stuck, because we'll show you exactly where it is. And I like that you didn't have to use that to find out where things. You could have just like explored at your leisure, try and find things by yourself. But to have that option in it as well, and to have it at sort of like a reasonable sort of price that made it still worth time worth your time like picking up those time shards even after you'd maxed out your skill tree. It was like, yeah, all worked really well, I thought.
Yeah.
So Draken, Nick, he had something to say about the way that the mechanics work in the game.
I lack the vocabulary to give the platforming action controls the praise it deserves. It's perfect. Well, as we said,
yes.
nearly, not quite, but it is very, very good.
You've got another long one from HOT. Greg.
So HOT said the platforming is so tight in this game. It handles perfectly and everything is so fast and fluid. It starts off pretty easy, but the difficulty soon ramps up, and before long you're having to combo runs, jumps, hook shots and air jumps all at once. It feels so satisfying to pull off. And he also mentions Dragon. He says, Dragon, I know you no longer go for platinum /100% in your games, but I would encourage you to track down all the collectibles in this. Some of the best platforming sections are hidden away and are found when searching for the items.
So I have a confession to make. I didn't collect all 100% of everything. In fact, I got very, very few power seals, and that's one of the collectibles. There are the time shards, as we mentioned, which unlock that skill tree in the shopkeeper's store, and there are power seals. So I don't even know what happens, what I've missed by collecting, which they're like a green icon, like a green wax seal, which there's a little, you go out of your way to a little platforming room or 2 rooms. You get through that, a little platforming challenge. You grab the seal, you smash it, and then it kind of lets you out the back door, doesn't it? Always an easy access way back out. So I did about 6 of them, I think, in my entire playthrough. How many of them were there in total?
45.
45. I believe you two got them all?
Yep.
Correct.
Was it worth getting them?
Absolutely.
Nick?
I think. Not for the prize that you get at the end, although the prize is quite cool, but just for the pure satisfaction of having completed every single difficult challenge in the game. I felt very satisfied after I got the last power seal, because some of those platforming challenges are extremely difficult. And some of them took me a good 15-20 minutes to actually do. So beating them all was... I couldn't have left it at 1 or 2 remaining. I had to do it. And I also finished the DLC 100% because there's about 10 more similar to Power Seals. And some of those challenges are just insanely hard. But I did them all. The prize that you get is a shuriken, like in Ninja Gaiden. So you throw it. It doesn't go off the screen, it comes back to you. However, you can jump over it and it just keeps going around you, like in Ninja Gaiden, basically. So very useful for bosses. If you can time everything right, you basically can just keep hitting them by doing nothing, by just jumping. So yeah, the reward's pretty cool, I think.
That's cool. Greg, you did collect everything. You got the shuriken. Which boss did you take down with it?
Yes, I'm actually not sure it was entirely worth it for the shuriken. I actually went through most of the game without really using the shurikens at all.
Yeah, me too, to be honest. Yeah.
So to have that one, which it doesn't work exactly the same way. Obviously, you have, I think is it 4 or 5 shurikens you have in your possession at one time? This one is like a refillable meter, so once you use it, it'll refill back up. So I definitely did use the shuriken to sort of help damage one of the bosses towards the end. I can't remember which one, but I do remember throwing it out a wee bit, and it did help probably take him down a wee bit quicker. But it also felt like I could have easily maybe done it without that anyway, just by using my normal moveset. So I do feel glad that I went after the power seals, and obviously you go through each area. It feels like so many times, backtracking to go through different things, and whatever way the story sort of takes you forward, you have to go back through sections. But it was nice to have to if you were going back through these sections, I might as well, there's a parcel just up there, I might as well take a wee detour, just go up and get it, do that. And so it did add a wee bit of something extra. But yeah, it probably wasn't entirely worth it for the reward, but I'm glad I did it at the same time.
I don't know if I'm glad I didn't do it or not, but I didn't, so it doesn't matter. So we'll move the conversation on to back, just concentrating now on the 8-bit section. Where you start in the ninja village, and we'll, where you're getting used to the mechanics, you're getting all those upgrades like Greg said. Within the 5 hours you've pretty much got all the upgrades you're going to see, except for the time shard bonuses from the shopkeeper's shop. Personally, apart from those infuriating cloud step jumps towards the end of the 16-bit, I found the 8-bit sections more difficult. Nick?
Yeah, I think so too, generally. I think the 8-bit sections are harder, like the ones that are specifically 8-bit. But again, like with Shovel Knight, I thought it was fairly nice to play through this sort of retro-looking game in a modern way. And obviously it's borrowed, like Shovel Knight, it's borrowed quite heavily from a number of classic side-scrolling games. Obviously Ninja Gaiden is the biggest influence. But yeah, I really liked the first few hours when your only goal is to go to the next section.
Left to right.
And I think, there's nothing else you need to do. If you find a power seal, fine, get it. You don't have to get it. You don't have to find them. You can do a little bit of exploring if you want, but the actual overall mission is to just keep going. And I liked that at the beginning of the game. It was just stage, boss, stage, boss, stage, boss. And I thought it was challenging, but not too challenging. Like, it was difficult, but it never felt unfair, basically. Everything felt doable, and I really enjoyed that first sort of 2 or 3 hours with the game where you're just going to the next section and seeing what's next, basically.
How are your thoughts on the first section there, Greg? More difficult, or...?
Again, I can't really remember it all that well. But that was part of my reason for actually bailing whenever the 16-bit came around, because I think I actually preferred it when it was more linear, like the opening part of the game, which is obviously all 8-bit, because it's just like direct left to right. And I think I would have... Obviously, like, if the developers or whatever were having to like create more environments and stuff, like that would have been probably an awful lot more work, really, to like keep creating new levels and stuff just to keep it like a linear experience, to like drag it out for whatever length of time. But like I said previously there, like you do go through these sections so many times whenever you move up to like the 16-bit stuff, or whenever the game opens up, really. But like I think I would have preferred a shorter, more linear experience, actually, which you got really at the start. And I know you guys were talking about like bosses for a bit, like during some of the Discord chat when you were sort of like sharing some thoughts, and obviously like I can actually remember the bosses really from that opening 8-bit section, because obviously you go through the levels and then you defeat a boss. It's like, I can't really remember that, to be honest with you, but I do remember it being more challenging than what I probably experienced throughout most of the rest of the game, actually.
Well, I think it was the sticking points, and that's why I was on Discord, venting my frustration at a certain boss. I just haven't got enough time. I got to go to work, and this boss, I can't get past it. But like Nick said, they were fair. Whenever you replay that boss, you would get a little bit further again, and then you go back. What I found frustrating is that the bosses sometimes took too long to beat, and you'd be put right back to the beginning of the fight. It was always the room next to it, so you didn't have far to traverse. There's always a shopkeeper's save point. So you come from a save point into the boss fight, but you have to do the whole thing again. There was one boss, and which was the one? The timekeeper. That's when the shopkeeper and the other two, the prophet and that short fat one, they get together and they create this huge, basically a huge version of them with 2 hands, which you have to jump up on the hands and dodge certain things. that was a really, really tasking challenge for me, because the first part of it was really easy and I was dozing off. It's like, something would catch me out because I wasn't concentrating enough. And then because I've taken hits early on, because I just can't concentrate on this repetitive, I've done it so many times, it's just so repetitive. And then when they got to the harder part, I just didn't have enough energy to get through it. So I found some of the bosses that frustrating because of the length of what you had to get through. So the bosses were the first one from Autumn Hills, when you got to the end of Autumn Hills, and most bosses came at the end of these levels. The leaf monster. No problems with him. Shooting his leaves out, duck his leaves, hit him when he's leafless. He drops easy. Ruxtin was the next one. He was quite funny. You remember him from he looks like this tall Grim Reaper, and then he shrinks to the floor and his cape all shrivels up, and he's this tiny little midget of a man wearing a face mask. You get his armlet in the 16-bit. I found him easy as well, first time. He's got like a rideable sky cloud which you can jump up on and hit him from, and then wail on him when he's on the floor. Any problems with him? No.
I don't remember.
Any standout bosses? Which boss did you like from this 8-bit era?
I thought the Timekeeper was the best one. I really enjoyed that boss fight. He was
an impressive boss.
It was difficult,
yes.
But not as difficult as other ones. I thought Kolos and Seuss's as well was a really cool boss. That took me a couple of goals to do.
That took me quite
the hardest one was the Queen of Quills, the other messenger. That took me forever to do it. I couldn't get it. I kept dying. I can't remember why, but having looked at that fight and remembering sort of the attack patterns, I remember I really struggled. I think it took well over 20 attempts to do that one. But
I had completely reverse. I finished off like 2 or 3 attempts, and then it was Collis and Susses I really struggled on. And the Timekeeper, I thought, how can they get any harder? And then along came that red dragon, the Sky Serpent, who ends up calling himself Manfred after you beat him as the red dragon. He turns blue. Did he cause you any trouble, Greg?
I don't remember. I'm not sure how late into the game that was. I know, I remember having difficulties with it, maybe a couple of the bosses, like in the original sort of portion of the game. And then when I resumed after 5 hours, and you guys were sort of like talking about your bosses and stuff, and I'm like, oh, well, I can't remember it, but I've obviously beaten them already, so fair enough. But there wasn't another boss fight maybe for another several hours, and I was kind of surprised by that. But even the ones that I have played since then, I don't actually really remember them particularly well, and I don't think I had much difficulty with any of them actually. I can't remember any that really stand out to me. They were all pretty straightforward. There's a few that were defeated first time.
The red dragon was on top of the clouds when he actually attacked, and you could fight him back. He was chasing you for 3 sections before that, so you had to run away and jump perfectly to get out of his grasp. And then when you got to fight him, it reminded me a lot of one of the Shovel Knight bosses. As he dove, he would crash through the clouds and then leave gaps in the floor as well, which you had to jump over. Eventually, he would completely wipe out 2/3 of the floor, and you had to use your cloud step jump to hit his projectiles to reach him, to hit him. That one took me a while as well, Nick.
I think, most of them took me a while. Some of them 2 or 3 attempts. I didn't do any first time, definitely. And then some took a little bit longer. But in general, I thought all the bosses were really cleverly designed and they were all unique. They all had different attack patterns and different things you needed to learn and follow and do. So yeah, I thought all the bosses in the game were solid. Some were easier than others, but they were all very, very solid, classic boss battles.
I agree. The variety was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Greg.
Yeah, there's nothing more than frustrating than if you're playing against a boss in any game and you feel like there's an attack that they do, it's where you feel like you can't evade it,
mm-hmm.
or whatever, but like I'd never had any sort of problems with that in this game. There's just they did have their patterns and stuff, and like once you knew what they were doing, it's like you had to set yourself, get ready for it, and dodge it in whatever way you needed to. So it all felt fair. Like there's no problem that way.
And Greg Drakan had something to say about the first half of the game, first third of the game, which is the 8-bit part.
He said it was an impeccable blend of linear level room design, especially in the first third of the game. And I can't really argue there. It was good.
Yeah, it was excellent.
Yeah. I think it was the part I enjoyed the most in terms of level design. Part 2 then, moving on to the 16-bit open world, and this happens when you get into the Temple of Time. Time-bending puzzles start making their face shown in this, where you can travel between the 8-bit and the 16-bit, and in the 8-bit, doorways might be closed. In the 16-bit, doorways may be open, vice versa. Impassable paths now become passable in one time or the other, so you had to arrive in certain places at the right time. So this flipping between present and past is really the only kind of puzzle mechanic that appeared in the game, and I don't think they overused it, and I don't think anything was too complex either, Nick.
Yeah, I thought this going between the past and the present it was absolutely ingenious. I really enjoyed this mechanic, and I really enjoyed all the puzzles that were designed around it. And like you said, yeah, there were some tricky ones, but never impossible. There was always a logic to it, and just when you go through the time zone and the music changes, the graphics change instantly. It's excellent. Like this, for me, this was one of the strongest points in the game. Like the puzzles built around this and how everything the whole game sort of fits around this mechanic. And the fact that it's only introduced after 3 or 4 hours, for me, I mean, I always knew going into the Messenger that it was a 16-bit and an 8-bit and a 16-bit game. But I had no idea that they'd pulled it off this well. And honestly, I disagree with you too. I think after the end of the linear section, that's when the game really starts to get good. When you have freedom, basically, and you can start exploring and going back and forth and just doing things. Like the first third of the game, very, very strong. But I think it really comes together later when you can go back and switch between 8 and 16-bit, definitely.
Was there any frustration in this kind of puzzle mechanic for you, Greg? I'm trying to think of times where you arrived to somewhere where you should be in the wrong time zone, for example.
100%. It's to be honest, whenever the time changing bit came in, that's probably when more of the frustrating parts of the game became apparent. I felt. I know Nick said there that whenever the game opened up, that's when it started to get really good. I've already said a couple of times, actually, you go through like all the sections so many times, and to be honest, the more times you go through it just felt like padding. Like, and like you'll need to go to like a certain area, and like some places have warp gates that you can go to, and then other places you have to maybe go through a level to get to it, and maybe you'll need to be in 16-bit or 8-bit to get through it that way, or you'll arrive at a certain point where you're in 8-bit and like, I need to be in the future in the 16-bit to do this, and you'll realize there isn't actually a warp point nearby, and you have to go all the way back. And that was probably one of the worst parts of the game, actually, whenever you reach those sections and realize that you did have to go back and change to a different era. Maybe didn't happen that many times, and when it did happen, you usually weren't that far away from being able to change time. But when it did happen, and you had to, like I say, again, when you went through sections so many times, but then whenever you did this section again, and then realised, I need to change time, then you have to go back through it, and then back through it again. It's like, yeah, it was too much on occasions.
I think the one that caught me out was the astral seed that you needed to plant in Collis and Susses of the Giants at the top of Searing Crags. you needed to plant the astral seeds in their herb patch so that you could get the tea leaves for the old ninja master. And yeah, I ended up there in the wrong time zone.
Yeah,
and then you got
I did the same.
drop all the way back to the bottom, and then the climb back up again.
Yeah.
I missed that completely. Like, I couldn't figure that out. I had to get the hint on the map to tell me to go to that room, because I tried to do something and I couldn't do something, and I was probably in the wrong time. But I agree. No, I agree with Greg completely there. Like, for me personally, it was only really a problem when I was trying to get time seals. When I was going back for the time seals, there was definitely a lot of like padding and going through sections again and again, which was annoying and frustrating. I think more warp points would have helped that. I think having 6, it's not really enough. I would have appreciated a couple more, because that is true. There is a little bit too much of going back and forth in the last third of the game when you're trying to sweep up time seals.
Yeah, the Tower of Time is your kind of central hub, and it's got 6, but some of them, I think half of them are locked first of all, aren't they?
Yeah, you have
to
to
travel to the other side of it in the real world to unlock it, so you can travel back to the Tower of Time. So yeah, there's only 6 of them, which is, like you say, one in each, not even one in each area.
Yeah. So just that was, it was more irritating than really frustrating, I would say. It's just, I've got to do that again. And yeah, it did sort of add a little bit too much to the overall game time. Probably more than it should have. But I think if you're just playing through the game and ignoring the power seals, I don't think it would be a big issue, to be honest.
No, I didn't have so much of an issue because I was ignoring the power seals. Didn't have to retraverse as much as you boys. That is probably one of the reasons why I didn't get those power seals, because I don't want to go back again. Bosses then for the 16-bit, and the 8-bit bosses were, like we say, diverse. Each one had some sort of mechanic, and true to name, they didn't, every single one of these had a different mechanic as well. First one was the Butterfly in Riviere Turquoise, where you would be forced to go through time to defeat him, because he was a bat in one time and then a butterfly in another one, which would as butterflies, as you hit a moth or whatever, they give off that dust. That dust then would highlight certain platforms that you could jump on, which you couldn't see in regardless. So there's a butterfly that was a bit different. The one I liked was Manfred's side-scrolling shooting sections. They didn't quite feel that good though. Sometimes you get hit by something and not realise that, that island there wasn't in the background, that's in the foreground, and I've just basically flown through it and taken a health hit there. So some of it didn't feel good, but the shooting felt very good. You could charge up as well to shoot, and the boss there was a side-scrolling shoot 'em up called the Clockwork Concierge. He was good. Any standouts from the bosses, Nick?
I found the 16-bit bosses much easier than the 8-bit bosses. I did the butterfly first time, actually. That is one I did do first time. Except the chase. After you've got all the music notes. That
in the cursed future.
Yeah, that took me absolutely ages. But yeah, it was definitely much easier, I would say, the bosses in that part of the game. Maybe that's because we're just used to the mechanics a bit more. But I definitely felt the difficulty sort of went down a little bit in the 16-bit sections, especially with the bosses.
And with who I thought was the final boss of the game, the Demon King, I beat him on the second go. He did something unusual toward the end, which I wasn't expecting. He finished me off. But on the second go, it's like, I know what's coming. It seemed a lot easier, Greg.
Yeah, like Nick, I'd done the Butterfly boss first time as well. I think I maybe done one of the other ones first time as well, although I can't remember which one it was actually. And yes, the Curse Chase did take take quite a few attempts, because maybe I hadn't been concentrating going up to it, but obviously you're going from left to right through like a section or whatever, and then all of a sudden this thing will pop up, and you're actually almost mesmerized by the graphics, because it does look very, very good. Like, it's a really nice sprite work on it. But my first thought as soon as it popped up was, right, this try and get a few hits in, and you realize it's just like almost within like a second it has you like it just comes and consumes you. So obviously you go again and you realize, right, I need to run away from it, and you try and run away, go the opposite direction, and your platforming needs to be pretty precise for most of it. You'll be doing your hook shot. I can't remember the name of it again, but the hook shot,
dart rope.
Yeah, the dart rope. You have to use that for sections, and like make sure you get your timing right with your jumps, and like taking out enemies at the right time. Maybe using the dart rope to grab them, to sort of like get yourself as much of a sort of head start as you can ahead of it, because the timing is so tight, you can't really make any mistakes throughout. And that issue cropped up, which I think Nick mentioned early on, about like attaching yourself to the walls and stuff.
Yeah,
that definitely happened a few times going through it. But I think that was maybe like one of the trigger sections outside of the DLC,
which I didn't play, as I said.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What
about the? Oh, sorry, carry on.
No, I was just gonna say, like, to be honest, I quite liked most of the bosses in the game, but I don't really remember them, which is I find kind of odd.
How about the last boss, the Phantom? He seemed an amalgamation for me of like Ruxtin and some of the other bosses we'd already fought. Some, maybe even the Tower of Time Guardians, sitting there on his organ, playing his music, and the skull appearing about him, lasers shooting around him, and there was even a game of Zelda-esque tennis between shooting his purple power source back and forth. That was a standout. But like you say, a lot easier. As Draken, Nick, he had a little bit more to say about the second half of the game.
He said, mixed with some of the best Metroidvanian gameplay I've experienced in my 25 years of video gaming. Bonus points for giving us the option to acquire hints to let us know where to go. The worlds aren't particularly large, which makes for a much more streamlined journey. Way more enjoyable than the likes of Super Metroid, one of the worst games in history. Yes, I'm serious.
Still haven't finished it myself.
I don't know, like I agree. I think it is a very, very good Metroidvania. And I also agree with the option to buy hints that we talked about earlier. I think I did find a couple of the music notes through using the clues that the guys in the Temple of Time give you.
The prophet.
But a couple of times I was just like, I have no idea where this is and what this means. So I just bought the hint and then went where I needed to go. So it's nice that it gives you the option, and it never gets too boring. You're not going to be exploring for hours trying to find what you need. So it is nice to have the option, definitely. Very, very wise move by the developers.
Greg HOT had something to say as well.
He did. He said the back and forth between both the 8-bit and 16-bit styles is a marvel to behold. It happens so seamlessly, and I was very impressed by the whole thing. What's even crazier is how the music also changes along with the graphics, which obviously we mentioned earlier. You start off with having portals appear only here and there, but eventually you'll see them as part of little fairies / butterflies that move around the stage. This new time travel mechanic makes for some great platforming sections where things will disappear in the past but show up in the future.
Spike walls. There were those infuriated me a bit as well in certain sections where there were walls of spikes, but you got a little butterfly which lives basically in both times, but when you hit it you see the past or the future, and then those spikes then don't exist in the past. You can then jump up, and as the butterfly is ascending you have to climb within a specific time frame and follow the butterfly up. Fortunately they didn't have, once you hit them they stayed on as it were. They didn't revert back to their normal self after a little while.
Yeah, I didn't really mind those wee sections. And to be honest, like was it Dragon was saying about the Metroid being one of the worst games in history. To be honest, playing through the Messenger and sort of preferring the linear sections, it's kind of partly made me realize like I'm not really that into the Metroid formula anymore. I know like I probably got my fill of it with playing like quite a few Castlevania games in quick succession, particularly on the DS. But like I definitely preferred like in the Messenger there's just that linearity from the first section. Because I feel like when it goes to sort of Metroidvania bits, it's almost like you're banging your head against the wall. Like you'll see something that's like, I'll come back to that later, and fair enough. Like the game does give you like the option to use hints, and I used hints pretty much all the time. As soon as I had the money to pay for the hint, like I was throwing the 300 time charge or whatever it was to to get it, because I did just prefer knowing where to go. But yeah, I hate that feeling of just like banging your head against the wall. Like ukulele is in particular is like I feel is really bad for it. It's like when you're going to like you come up to a challenge and I need something else to be able to do that, and then you'll go to try and get what it is you need. It's like, oh no, I can't do that yet because I need something else. And I've grown to hate it more and more. Just that feeling of not being able to do the thing I need without having to jump through a million hoops to achieve it.
Ori and the Blind Forest sticks out for me. So the end game then. So how do you think the Metroidvania upgrade mechanics and the way you can upgrade, how do they hold up? Like I said earlier, for myself, they make you powerful, but they don't make you godlike. People said like in Super Metroid, you can just power through the entire game, but this, you still have to be very careful. Nick?
Yeah, I think that every upgrade in this game and everything that it gives you as you progress, it really adds to your abilities, to your movement, to your flexibility. I think the there's not too many of them. Like you're not thrown more and more and more upgrades. Like there's like 5 or 6 genuinely solid upgrades, which really like enhance your abilities. And even though you don't feel godlike, you definitely feel much more capable, and you can just sort of power through levels. Like when we said before, going back for the power seals, like Autumn Hills for me, just easy. I can get across it in 2 minutes by just comboing together all the abilities and killing all the enemies without making any mistakes, because I did it so many times. And I feel like that was true in all of the levels as well. Like for example, the mountain, I can't remember what it's called now, but the ice
glacial peak.
Like you can just literally from the top to the bottom, you can do it in about 1 minute, because you can just drop down and then use the rope dart where you need to cling on to something. You can cloud jump like bits, and it's just very, very fluid. And obviously the first time you get to that part, you're going up and everything's slippery and you don't quite have all the abilities that you would need, so it's much more challenging. So I do really like how much more powerful you become as the game progresses, and some of the earlier stages just become like a walk in the park. Basically, you can stream through them. But the other sort of new stages that get introduced, like the Elemental Skylands and the what's it called again, the Riviera Turquoise, so
Riviera Turquoise, yeah,
like that.
The Dark
that's
Cave.
very challenging, despite you already having like all your abilities. So it's a really nice mix, I think, and I think the way that everything progresses in this game from the very beginning to the end is just absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed every step of the way.
So Draken's kind of final assessment of the game said it is an easy 10 out of 10. In my eyes, it's a perfect game. Tight controls, awesome 2D action platforming, banger music, as he said, beautiful graphics, hilarious from start to finish, and a joy to play. Easily the best game he's played this year and one of the best ever. Do you agree with that, Greg?
It's probably one of the better games I've played this year, certainly. One of the best ever. I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, we've played Hollow Knight as one of our PodPals games a year or two ago. I think I like this better than Hollow Knight, actually. And maybe it was like the aesthetics or whatever, or just the movement or whatever. It just felt like a good game. I don't know if... Like, it's not a game I would be itching to go back and play again. I feel like I'm done with it now. Like it's done, and I don't think I would actually ever return to it. But what I did play was really good. The only thing I would say is it lasted a lot longer than I anticipated. I thought it was going to be like 10 or 11 hours maybe, and I think in the end it was like over 17 hours that it took me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think I racked up about it was over 15 on my Switch, on the Switch system. It said over 15 hours, but not much over it. So HOT said it eases you into one of the most game mechanics whilst you're playing through the linear part of the game, and then once it opens up that area free to explore, you should be accustomed to the moves like Nick was saying at this point, and traversing through the various stages should come naturally. It's easily one of the best indie games he's played in a while as well.
Yeah.
So I think we're all in agreement there. Yeah.
I think I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10. I think it's a very solid game. I think it is one of the best indie games I've played. I preferred Hollow Knight, to be honest. Overall I prefer Hollow Knight, but I think this is a fantastic platformer, Metroidvania. I finished it in just under 14 hours, 100%, and then another 3 for the DLC, which is free, by the way. So I think definitely everybody should give it a go. I think it's an amazing tribute to 16-bit and 8-bit games. If it just controlled slightly better at times, I think it would be a 10 out of 10. But there's just a couple of issues with the controls and a couple of frustrating things that really hold it back from being a perfect game. But it is very, very, very solid. Jacob disagrees.
I was going to say that looking back now at Hollow Knight, and while I was frustrated with Hollow Knight at that time, I think Hollow Knight is a better game. The mechanics in Hollow Knight hold up so much better, the kind of battle mechanics and everything. While I would give The Messenger like 8 out of 10, I would probably give Hollow Knight 9 out of 10.
Even though you didn't finish it.
Even though I didn't finish it, and that makes me think I should go back and get back onto it.
You should, definitely. Yeah.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give us a like if you've enjoyed our content. You can also check out our other great content on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the N-E Café podcast from all good podcast providers. Just follow the links in the description below.